The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Here's what's cooking on today's Sports Stove Football Show. We've got the latest NFL news and the Sports Stove Mock Draft 1.0 drop this week. We'll talk all about it. That's what's cooking on today's Sports Stove Football Show. Welcome in to today's edition of the Sports Stove Football Show, presented by Righteous Felon Jerky. Join the flavor revolution. Find your new favorite flavor of jerky at righteousfelon.com. Use the promo code STOVE15, STOVE15, to get 15% off your purchase. The NFL season has officially come to an end. We still have several weeks before, or at least a couple of weeks before spring ball begins and the free agency and the draft and all kinds of stuff going on. And for one last time in the Kentucky studio, we're bringing this show to you, as next week we'll be on a brand new, actually next week we're going to be off, and then the following week we'll be on a brand new studio from there. I'm Vince Stover, joined as I am every week by my dad, Dale Stover. Dad, how you doing?
Good. Doing good. Like I said, boy, heading right on into the football and the draft, in some ways seems like a long ways away, but time flies in just a couple months. And of course, a lot leading up to that. So, and of course, we've had the college bowl games, Senior Bowl, stuff like that. So some of that stuff starting to, you're hearing the results of some of that. So, a lot going on here with football. And I know you're excited to be in the new studio here in a couple weeks. So, looking forward to tonight. On the eve of what is almost a national holiday tomorrow. So
True. Yeah,
that's right. The Sports Stove founder's birthday. So anyhow, happy birthday a day early. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that. What did you do on the first weekend of no football?
Well, again, honestly, there was quite the hockey game. So I watched that and NASCAR and, plenty of sports still going on. But a lot of football. And of course, we're really, really big into baseball fantasy draft season. Of course, you've got your show on Sunday nights with Kevin Wilson, and that's a real help. But a lot of studying on my part going on because got 3 drafts coming up in just a couple of weeks. So,
so Sunday embarked a new season in fantasy NASCAR. And so the Daytona 500, and then, fantasy baseball is in full bloom. We've been going through player rankings on our show on the weekends, and excited to get into that, of course, as well. But that's what I did pretty much too. I definitely watched some racing this weekend. I'm trying to remember what else I watched. I watched something else because there was a rain delay. Oh, EKU baseball. I was watching college baseball on Sunday as well. So that was exciting too. But this show is all about football, so let's get into it. The NFL announces a increase in about $22 million worth for the salary cap, which will help teams that have a lot of salary cap already and help those that are trying to get under those, those different guidelines and things as well. I don't know, Dad, how much does the salary cap affect your paying attention to it throughout the off season and things like that?
Well, I think with free agency coming up, I'm interested in it because, like you said, people that are already pretty good on the salary cap, and the Packers are much better than they have been in the last couple of years. An increase, only helps that. And of course, it fortifies the fact that the NFL is doing very well financially. So.
Yeah, they are for sure, and it's intriguing to watch it continue, and that's good. I mean, as a fan, I think it's a good thing. Excited about it. We'll see if it means anything for the Packers all season as well. One quarterback domino is now fallen. Andy Dalton, 2-year contract extension with the Panthers. I think it's a good situation for Dalton. I think it's a good situation for Bryce Young. It sounds like they get along well, and he knows his role there as well. And I think he's at that age and point in his career where being a backup's not a big deal to him. I don't know. Any thoughts on Dalton re-signing in Carolina?
No, I think it's good. And like you said, I think it's something more teams ought to do. If you could line up a guy like Andy Dalton, to work with a younger guy, that's a good situation. And, I think Dalton's a guy character-wise, a lot of ways that can be a help. And so I think it's good for Carolina there.
Yeah, Detroit. We talked about these Lions a few weeks ago. We talked about they were going to lose both of their coordinators. They did. The head coaching jobs, and both you and I were a little skeptical of what the carryover would be for Detroit. Would they be able to maintain, or would they take a step back? I definitely think they're going to take a step back. But they've signed offense coordinator John Morton. David Shaw comes over as a pass game coordinator, helping there on there as well. Bruce Gradkowski is the assistant quarterbacks coach. Marcus Tuiasosopo comes in as an offensive assistant as well. But not only did they lose their coordinators, they lost some of these other positions because those coordinators took some guys with them. Glenn to New York, and of course to Chicago as well with Ben Johnson. So none of these hires for the Detroit are ones that make you go, oh, wow. Right. I don't know. Where do you stand right now in Detroit and the coaching changes that they've had here this offseason?
Well, I agree with you. I think it will definitely have a negative effect somewhat on Detroit because, again, like you said, well, is they going to take a step, back or stay the same? Well, you don't stay the same. You really need to make progress. And I don't know that, this is a situation that did, maybe a couple, maybe one of these guys will be really good. But all it'll take is a season to not start good and then especially when you're dealing with Johnson. I mean, I think he had such credibility and he did so well. I'm sure he gave the offense and even the defense, the whole team, a lot of confidence. Of course, the defensive coordinator, was a veteran and had been there. So, this changes that. And we will see. The coach, of course, a dynamic personality. And, if it's a guy that can rally the troops, it'll be him. But as far as in the trenches, calling the plans, it's going to be a change there in Detroit. And it really does look like the North is a very, very strong division. And it's only going to be that way. I think the Packers will have a better season. Depending what Minnesota does, a quarterback, I think, they've got a good coach, and I think they're doing much better. Johnson would plan on turning things around in Chicago fairly quickly, at least it'd be competitive. And surely you would think the Bears-Lions game will be interesting just from the coaching standpoint. Sure. So a lot of motivation there. So, yeah, things have changed a little bit in the North, and boy, going to be a lot of competition. So I think every team has got to step it up to stay competitive.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Well, one of the biggest ways teams can improve in the offseason is through the draft, and the draft is something that I really geek out on once we get through the season. I've actually been working on my big board now for several weeks, really since the start of the new year, and decided to go ahead and drop mock draft 1.0 this week. It went out on bellyupsports.com. You can find it on our socials as well at Sports Stove on Twitter or X and Instagram. And so today just kind of wanted to take a couple minutes to run through this draft, see if there's anything that stood out to you, maybe be able to share a little bit of my reasoning behind some of these things as well. And so we'll kind of run through the top 10 to get things started. Tennessee at 1, and there were no trades in this mock draft. Mock draft 2.0, we'll start doing some trades in that one. I know I read today of a rumor that the Jets were trying to get up to 1 to take Cam Ward. It's a little ways to go for them. It's not super far at 7, but I don't know that Titans, they would get a pretty big haul for it. So we'll see where they decide to go with that. But Titans sitting at 1, Dan. I ended up going with Travis Hunter out of Colorado. I really think Cam Ward's a high possibility here at number 1, but everything that the Titans front office has said so far this offseason really points to Travis Hunter. And I try to get these things right. So I'm trying to listen as much as I can. And you got to kind of get through the smoke screens a little bit and figure out what's real and what's not. By the time we get to the draft, it's just really hard to believe that a quarterback won't go number one. But as it sits right now, if the Titans stay where they are, I don't think they truly believe in Will Levis, but I'm not sure if they truly believe in Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders either. So maybe they take a swing at a guy in the second round versus going after the guy in the first round. So I got Travis Hunter going here 1 to the Titans. Would that surprise you to see Hunter go 1, or do you think there has to be a quarterback at 1?
No, I mean, with Hunter being the talent he is, now again, if there's a trade up to the Titans, then they're probably going to trade up to get a quarterback more than likely. But as far as sheer talent is concerned, Hunter's one of those players that's going to make a difference. And I think the Titans could use that. I still think the Titans would be wise if they can get enough to trade that pick, because they need maybe more than one player, and at this point, and I think with the new coach there and everything, the new coach last year, I think making a trade would make some sense for them if they can find the right deal. But if not, Hunter would be a definite addition for them, no doubt about it.
I think that if the Titans are going to trade, it has to be in the top 3. It has to be the Giants trying to jump up to get the guy they want, where the Titans are still going to get either a quarterback or Travis Hunter, or maybe they like Abdul Carter better, or whatever it may be. I feel like if they can stay in the top 3, it's beneficial for them to move down. If they don't, then they got to get more than draft picks. They got to get players in there as well that they can plug and play this year. And I'm not sure they're going to get that from a team trying to trade up at this point in the draft. All right, that's number 1. Number 2 and 3 go the quarterbacks. I got Cam Ward going to Cleveland, Shedeur Sanders to the Giants. I have Cam Ward ahead of Shedeur Sanders in my big board. I like him better. I think it makes more sense. He's more athletic. Shedeur Sanders comes from an athletic family, but he's really more of a pocket passer. And so when you look at Cam Ward and what he brings to the table, it's so much more. His weaknesses may be Sanders' strengths and the other way around. But ultimately, I just think if you're going to take a quarterback here, I'd take Ward over Sanders. So I go Browns, Ward, Giants, Sanders. And honestly, I'm not sure if either of these guys solve what the problems are in Cleveland and New York either. Would you be surprised if the Browns and the Giants both took quarterbacks if they're sitting there at 2 and 3?
No, that would make sense. Like I said, are these guys ready to play right now? I don't know. And both teams might, throw them into that situation. So we will see. But no, these are the, top 2 quarterbacks, and both these teams, definitely need quarterbacks. So I think that makes sense. And I think if they stay in this order, I think Cam Ward and then Sanders is probably the order to go in.
All right. Well, if Hunter and the 2 quarterbacks go in the top 3, it'll start to get fun then at number 4, because the Patriots could go a lot of different directions with this draft. And I've got them going Will Campbell, the tackle out of LSU. You look at a few teams in this draft, New England and Chicago being the main ones, of having to make sure that their quarterback is protected. Young quarterbacks, they'll be coming into their sophomore seasons. And while there's some really good players available at number 4, Abdul Carter again would be one of those. Will Johnson would be one of those. I feel like the Patriots and the Bears both will be looking to shore up that offensive line versus going wide receiver or cornerback, other things. Because, the Patriots could use a cornerback for sure. They're at number 4. But I just think Will Campbell's the best offensive lineman in the draft, and they take him there at number 4.
Yeah, again, when you look long term, you never have enough good offensive linemen, and they do have a young quarterback, so I think that would make sense. But again, I think you have to look at the quality of the defensive guys that are going to be available at that pick, because those are difference makers. And in the last couple of years, you've had guys draft and come in and really make a difference there on defense. So I don't know. You got Elliott Wolf, who has a background, who I think easily could take offensive line. I'm not sure what Vrabel's preference would be on this at that point. The thing is, you just have, especially here at the top of the draft, looks like some extremely, extremely talented defensive players. So, do you pass that opportunity up to take an offensive lineman? If this offensive lineman is one of the, a guy that's going to be an all-pro for, 8, 9, 10 years, then yes, you anchor, and especially when you got a young quarterback like they do, then that probably makes some sense. So if Campbell's that kind of player, then yes, you could do it. Another thing with New England is if they do want to take the offensive lineman, they might could trade down a couple picks and still get the offensive lineman they want and then pick up some more picks. Again, I think Wolf would have a background in that area a little bit too. So, it'll be interesting to see if there's a lot of movement in the first round trade-wise, because there is a lot of talent there. And when there's a lot of talent, you can move a few spots and still get what you need.
Sure, definitely. You got to have somebody who wants to come up is the other problem there. And if those three guys are gone, I'm not sure who would be coming up to get who there at number 4 as well. So that'll play a big role in it for sure. Jacksonville, they've got a lot of needs. I went with cornerback Will Johnson. He's one of my favorite players in the draft. Had some injury issues here this past season, but when he was healthy, he was really, really good. The Jaguars, they've got enough needs that, I think defense is where they got to focus, shore that up. They got so much talent on offense that just needs to work together. And they hired a new coach, so we'll see what happens with that. But again, you're talking about the number 1 player at a position here at number 5, being able to get him locked in. I've got the Jaguars taking Will Johnson at 5 because I think that's a bigger need for them than the other guys that are available right now, looking at guys like Abdul Carter and Mason Graham, or even Michael Williams from Georgia. So I got 5. I got the Jaguars taking Will Johnson, cornerback, Michigan. 6, I got the Raiders going Abdul Carter, Penn State. Again, Max Crosby could be gone, so finding a replacement for him. Abdul Carter is right now being touted as the best edge guy in the draft, and there's several. Edges is one of the deeper positions in this year's draft, so you could pass maybe here and get someone later. And there's a lot of talk about Ashton Genty here. Talk about the Raiders trading up for a quarterback, or maybe even trading down for a quarterback, whatever it may be at 6. But I really like these defensive players. Actually, Will Johnson at 5 and Abdul Carter at 6. You talked about the Patriots. Can you pass on these defensive guys? Well, it makes sense for the Jaguars and the Raiders to grab these guys.
Yeah, I think the Jaguar pick makes a lot of sense there, no doubt about it. And I think the Raiders are a team that could make a move, to get a quarterback. That definitely is one I think that could be in the works. But again, this Carter is going to be quite a player, out of Penn State. So that'd be a good pick also.
Yeah, and we talked last week about veteran quarterbacks. I think the Raiders are going to make a hard push to get a veteran quarterback versus a rookie. They might draft a guy again, 2nd round, 3rd round, and let him sit behind a veteran or something like that. I'd be a little surprised if they went up. I know early on there was a lot of talk about them going up to get Shedeur Sanders, but that was before the Pete Carroll signing, so I'm not sure where they'll go there. A few more defender guys. Number 7, the Jets. I've got them taking Mason Graham, the defensive tackle or lineman out of Michigan. And Carolina going Michael Williams, edge out of Georgia. Again, you look at the Jets, they need a quarterback, but at 7, well, what's the point? But defensive tackle, I think, is an important spot for them to fill. Graham is a solid player out of Michigan, had a really good career in college. And then Williams from Georgia for the Panthers. Again, the Panthers, they can go a lot of different directions as well. They need some playmakers for sure. So maybe even like an Ashton Genty could sneak in here to the Panthers. But ultimately, I think they go with a solid, there's some, I think, can't miss guys here in the first round. And I think Williams is one of those guys, barring injury being an issue. I think that he's going to be a solid football player. Not guaranteeing he's going to be a stud, but he's not going to be bad as well. And Carolina needs good football players. So 2 more defenders going 7 and 8 with Mason Graham and Michael Williams.
Yeah, well, these are both very good players, and they would fit. The Jets, I don't know what they'll do. That'll be, That'll be really interesting. They have a lot of needs. They're basically going to be in a rebuild. You get a great defensive lineman, you can anchor on that. Same way, with offensive line, and of course, in today's NFL, edge rusher is very, very important. So I could see them going any number of ways at this point. Again, and unless they trade up to get a quarterback.
All right, rounding out the top 10 is with some offensive players. I got the Saints going Tyler Warren, tight end out of Penn State. Of course, Colston Loveland, it would be an option if a tight end is what they want to do as well. Again, I read and listen to a lot of people who know what they're talking about, and they think there's going to be 2 tight ends gone by the top 16, and that's intriguing to me. Tyler Warren is this athlete with amazing size, can do a lot of different things as a tight end, and his skill set is just really amazing. So the Saints need playmakers as well. They're aging at some spots. They do not have a great tight end. They have a free agent at tight end right now. So I think Tyler Warren is an intriguing option here. Again, the Saints they may have as many needs as anybody in the top 10. Right now, they could go edge rusher, they could go wide out, they could go cornerback, they could go D line. Again, quarterback's always an option for them too. I just think Tyler Warren is this guy that's going to be a unique skill set that these guys can find things to do with them on the offense, that they can move them around, do some different special things with them. The way that tight ends are being used in the NFL today, Tyler Warren's a pretty awesome fit for New Orleans. And then Chicago. Again, you got to protect the quarterback. You got to protect Caleb Williams. I see some people throwing out wide receiver here at 10, but I think step one in this new regime is going to be protect Caleb Williams. Kelvin Banks is sitting there at 10, so I give him to Chicago. And really, that's kind of a popular fit right now for Chicago. If Kelvin Banks is there at 10, or if Will Campbell's there at 10, there could be other offensive linemen that people like. Josh Simmons is kind of going up boards right now, but I go Kelvin Banks at 10 to Chicago. So Saints, Tyler Warren, Chicago, Kelvin Banks.
Well, New Orleans, like you said, just has lots of needs. But to get a standout tight end, you can see the Raiders did that last year. And, boy, that made a big deal. And I think that's going to help them as they continue to build here in the next few years. Anytime you can get a real dominant player. And it does seem like this Warren kid is that way. So I think that would be maybe a wise choice there. The Bears, again, I mean, I'm going to be prejudiced, but yes, protect the quarterback is what you need to do. So I think that means the Bears will probably draft a wide receiver or a running back. So we will see. We'll see how that goes. Their defense, is pretty strong right now. So definitely and they've got an offensive head coach from there. But, as far as what the organization and the GM is going to do, it'll be fun to hear who they draft after the boos there in Green Bay subside and you can hear who they drafted. That'll be good.
Very good. Very good. All right. Next up, San Francisco. I have them going edge. Shedeur Sanders out of Texas A&M. I'll run through the 5 at a time here, and then we can talk about whichever ones you want to talk about. Shedeur Sanders, again, going up boards. They have him ranked different places and around. So, we'll see. San Francisco, again, with several needs, honestly, coming into this year. Cowboys, Ashton Jeanty. This is the one I'd least like out of all of this first-round pick that I did. It just kind of makes sense. A lot of people are thinking that's what Dallas will do, which means they probably won't. But they need a running back, and Ashton Jeanty's the best one in the draft, so I have him going to Dallas. Miami, Malachi Starks, safety out of Georgia. Indianapolis with a tight end, Colston Loveland out of Michigan. And Atlanta, the edge out of Tennessee, James Pierce Jr. Dad, when I look at these 5, 11 and 12, 49ers and Cowboys, I don't necessarily love these picks, but 13, 14, and 15, I do. Malachi Starks, top safety, going to the Dolphins. Colston Loveland, a top 2 tight end in Indianapolis to help out with the needs there, and a young quarterback in Anthony Richardson. And then Atlanta, they should have drafted probably an edge rusher last year at 1, and they didn't do it. So they go out and get James Pierce out of Tennessee here at 15. Any of those 5 picks you want to discuss?
Well, when I looked at your big board here, immediately the one I said, wow, that makes all kinds of sense, was Dallas. I think taking that running back, that's exactly what would make sense for them to do, especially with their history and the way they play. I think that would make sense. Indianapolis, adding a good tight end, that would definitely help them. So, yeah, and then, of course, defense at Atlanta, defense at San Francisco, and the safety at Miami. I think those all make a lot of sense.
Yeah, that tight end class, I almost talked about them tonight instead of this mock draft, because the tight end, it's a really deep position again this year also. And so teams might pass on these top guys to wait and try to get a guy in the second round, because there's some really good tight ends available in the second round as well. But Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren are both elite tight ends and can make a huge difference for these young quarterbacks for these teams. All right, let's see here. 16 through 20, Arizona Cardinals. I have them taking the first wide receiver off the board, and Tatiro McMillan from Arizona. The Bengals going cornerback, Siobhan Revel Jr. out of Eastern Carolina. The Seahawks going Jalen Walker, the linebacker out of Georgia. Some people have him listed as an edge. It seems like most people like him more just as a stand-up linebacker versus an edge guy. He can rush the quarterback some as well. Tampa, wide receiver from Ohio State, Emeka Egbuka. I am higher on Egbuka than most people I see. I really think that right now in the success of Ohio State receivers is going to push him up the board. He's an amazing wide receiver as is. Tampa, Mike Evans, we'll see. They've got Godwin as a free agent. So they have a good receiver last year that they drafted, I believe, out of Washington, if I remember right. Adding another young receiver would be awesome for them. And then Denver gets one of my favorite players in this draft, Nick Emenwari, the safety out of South Carolina. This guy is big. He is powerful. He is a very good safety. I actually like him more than Malachi Starks, but I still think Starks goes over him. T-Mac at 16 to the Cardinals, Revel to the Bengals, Jalen Walker to the Seahawks, Egbuka to the Bucks, and Emenwari to the Broncos. Any thoughts on any of these 5 guys?
Well, I mean, here in Ohio, there's a lot of talk that Cincinnati is really going to step up to the plate this year and keep, both their wide receivers and their pass rusher. History would not bear that out, but if they do that, which they could, because, again, they're still Super Bowl contenders. If they could get those guys locked up, then this cornerback, that's a great pick. Because, you never have enough good cornerbacks. They have a need for that. If they bring Hutchinson back, as a pass rusher, that would be a good pick. If they don't keep both the wide receivers, okay, then, you may need something there. One of these good tight ends would make sense, but they might could get them, like you said, a good tight end in the second round or whatever the case might be. So otherwise, these defensive picks make sense. I think the wide receiver at Tampa would. Their receivers are getting older and have had some injury situations. But again, Tampa might could use some help in some other areas to shore things up quicker.
Yeah, when I'm looking at cornerbacks, by the way, there's a couple of them there. Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame, Jade Brown, I think, from Texas, as well, could be here. Revel, though, has had a really good college career and seems to be a kind of guy that teams are really going to like. And so Cincinnati, listen, they could go offensive line. They could go playmaker as well. If one of these tight ends falls, if Loveland or Warren falls, I could see him go in that direction for sure. But I think they need to shore up that cornerback spot in Cincinnati. And again, Arizona adding the top tier receiver to Harrison would be really cool, I think, and fun to see as well. All right, let's go through 21 through 25. Steelers, I have them going Benjamin Morrison, cornerback, Notre Dame. He's had some injury issues, but again, when healthy, and had he stayed healthy, probably one of the, maybe the second best cornerback in the draft, but those injury scares might push him down just a little bit. Got the Chargers going Nick Skirton from Texas A&M, the tight end, the edge. He's a guy that's kind of falling down boards right now. So that's probably something that could change. Maybe even a guy that we have later on in the draft, like a Mike Green, maybe up there, something to that effect. We'll keep an eye on that one. Got Green Bay going Walter Nolan, defensive tackle, Ole Miss, to shore up the D line, especially in this 4-3 setup that they're running now. The Vikings, Omarion Hampton, running back, North Carolina. This kid's skill set is ridiculous, and he's not better than Genty, but he's better than the rest of the running backs. The other running backs have strengths. Omarion Hampton has it all. So behind Ashton Genty, at this point, I'd be surprised if Hampton's not a first-round pick. And the Vikings, although they're probably going to re-sign Aaron Jones, and we like kind of what they have there in their running back room, but Hampton, I think, is too good to pass up. And then Houston at 25, again, you got to protect your young quarterback. Tyler Booker, guard, Alabama, is who I have going there. There's all kinds of offensive linemen that you can throw into this spot. Josh Simmons from Ohio State is definitely an option here. There's a few options, but I'm going to go Tyler Booker, guard, Alabama, to Houston. So, Dad, of those 5 picks, Steelers, Benjamin Morrison, Chargers, Nick Skirton, Packers, Walter Nolan, Vikings, Omarion Hampton, and Texans, Tyler Booker. Any of those you want to talk about?
Well, when I looked at your draft, I immediately looked up to find out more about Nolan. It seems like, the Packers need a defensive lineman, inside lineman, and they need a cornerback, no doubt about that. But this Nolan kid, the more I read about him, if we could get the second defensive lineman in the draft, I think that's almost a no-brainer. It might even be worth going up a spot or two if you needed to, because this guy looks like he can be a difference maker from there, no doubt about it. So that one I like. Again, there's a lot of good cornerbacks in this draft, so that would make some sense too, but maybe there's going to be some in another round or whatever that will work from there. And I think they'll take a couple defensive linemen depending on
Sure.
how deep it is and where it goes later on, 4th, 5th round from there. When I looked at your draft, the one that I scratched my head about was Minnesota. Now, if that running back's as good as it is, but I don't think that's their biggest need at this point in the first round. So I wouldn't think, there. Maybe somebody would take him earlier. The Chargers might make sense for him. There might be some others. If not, then somebody's probably going to get a steal here down the line somewhere. But we will, because the next couple picks definitely, next 3 definitely don't need running back. So we'll see where that goes. Maybe that's a guy that slides a little bit. We'll see.
Yeah, when you look at running back needs, Pittsburgh possibly. Najee Harris is a free agent this year, so depending on what they do there, they could re-sign him. Really ahead of Pittsburgh. Until you got Dallas to Pittsburgh, there's really not a running back need there. Then you got again Minnesota, depending on what they do with free agency and Aaron Jones, and then after that, you're kind of looking at down the line a little bit. Could Houston, they got Joe Mixon, so they really don't need necessarily anybody. Ravens are set. Rams are really good. Commanders would be an interesting one as well as far as running back goes. They got running backs, but they could definitely make an improvement there as well. So, I don't know. To me, he fits Minnesota, and so that's why I put him there. All right, let's go through the next 5. We got the Rams taking the 3rd quarterback, Jackson Dart from Ole Miss. Again, there's lots of talk about Matt Stafford playing somewhere else this season. He could also possibly retire, so quarterback will be a big need for the Rams, and it makes sense for them to go out and draft one this year. The Ravens getting just fortunate. Josh Simmons, offensive tackle, Ohio State. The rich get richer in some ways there. Detroit Lions, Mike Green. Everyone thinks Mike Green's going to go before 28, and he could be a guy that's up there at 22 for the Chargers or even higher. There's still a few just concerns about Mike Green, even though his talent level is really good. Nowadays, I don't know. I feel like people are a little bit more scared to take a swing on some of these guys. So he fits the Lions. He's just a baller when it all comes down to it. So I got him at 28. Commanders, I got them going Luther Burden III, wide receiver from Mizzou. Lots of options there at 29 for Washington. And they have, a few needs. They could go edge. They could go O-line. They could go linebacker. They could go corner as well. And then Buffalo Bills at 30. I've got them taking wide receiver Jaden Higgins out of Ohio State. The wide receiver picture is really muddy as far as which ones will go here towards the end of the first round versus wait until the second round on. I just think that when Jaden Higgins does his pro day and his combine stuff, his size is incredible. His athleticism is nuts. He's just an all-around wide receiver. I got to see him in person for a year and then followed him once he went to Ohio State or Iowa State. And I just think he fits what the Bills need right now. And so I got them taking Jaden Higgins. But again, there are a lot of options at wide receiver. And they took a wide receiver in the first round last year, but they still have a need at wide receiver there too. So those 5 picks: Rams, Jackson Dart; Ravens, Josh Simmons; Lions, Mike Green; Commanders, Luther Burden III; and Bills, Jaden Higgins. Thoughts on those 5?
Well, again, I haven't dug into the draft super strong yet, but I have looked at several mock drafts even a couple weeks ago. And you're right, Mike Green, is estimated to go higher. So we'll see where that goes. There, the Lions have some needs, and defense is probably not a bad spot there, for them. Washington adding wide receiver. I saw Burden play a few games, and I think he's really, really good. So, but like you said, probably the top 3, 4, 5 wide receivers are all going to be guys who can come in and play and make a difference. From there, Buffalo, adding more weapons there with Josh Allen, that always makes sense. So, we'll see. Like you said, I haven't looked exactly how deep the offensive line thing is in this draft. But, when you're talking about the top first round guys, there's always teams that can add those in and not hurt themselves for sure.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at wide receiver, I've got about, I think 7 guys that could be first rounders. You got T-Mac from Arizona, Trey Harris from Ole Miss, who didn't make my first round this time around. Egbuka from Ohio State, Luther Burden, Mizzou, Higgins, Iowa State. And then you've got the 2 guys from Texas as well. I think once you get past T-Mac, it really comes down to which one fits your system and which one you like. It's going to be intriguing to watch teams try to match the skill set of the receiver with their system. And there's so many just different kinds. So wide receivers are going to be a hard one, I think, to predict as far as what teams are going to take. You can predict they're going to take receiver, but you might have a hard time predicting which receiver it's going to be. Last 2 of the first round, I got the Kansas City Chiefs taking Derek Harmon, defensive tackle out of Oregon. I like Harmon a lot. I had him higher originally in my big board, but again, listening, reading, trying to follow what teams are thinking, it looks like he's behind Walter Nolan now. So I've got him down to Kansas City. They can add him to the defensive line and obviously help them out a lot. The Chiefs have some needs on the defensive line. On the offensive line, they got some free agents this year. So they might, I think they'll probably sign offensive linemen versus draft them. But we'll see where that goes. They can always use playmakers, and then an edge rusher as well. Although Karlaftis is looking really good these days. Philadelphia, the Super Bowl champs. I got them taking Josh Connerly, offensive tackle from Oregon as well. Again, they've got some free agents this year. Maybe even our next show, we'll talk about some of these players from the Chiefs and the Eagles that are going to get these, the Super Bowl bump where they're free agents now and people want them because of they were in the Super Bowl and things like that as well. The Eagles might lose some guys as a result of that this year. And you were talking earlier about you can't have too many good offensive linemen. I think the Eagles are a perfect example of that, where they drafted offensive linemen even when they didn't necessarily need them at the time. But then once Kelsey retired, they had someone who could step right in and do the job and do it really, really well. So, again, offensive linemen, you've got Campbell, Banks, Emory Jones from LSU. I really like Ariante Ersey from Minnesota. I think he's going to fall to the second round. But it would not surprise me if he goes in the first round. And then you've got another kid from Arizona, Josh Simmons, Josh Connerly as well. So plenty of options when it comes to the offensive line, especially offensive tackle. But again, I got the Chiefs going Derek Harmon defensive line and the Eagles going Josh Connerly offensive line, both from Oregon. Your thoughts on those two teams?
Like you said, both those teams with where they're at talent-wise can really just sit there and use, the best player, people that can help them. Kansas City seem like they always do a good job with that. And so, the same way with Philadelphia, depending on really what happens with free agency.
Yes.
The Chiefs have been, they've just been so unique at being able to, hey, lose a guy to free agency, no problem. And they just get another guy that seems to, plug in there. So, they're going to look at what they need. I think the Eagles right now, you'd say, wow, they're fine at offensive line. But like I said, there's probably some free agents there. And, when you win the Super Bowl, and a big payday can come pretty quick. So I think both those teams would look to just plug holes with the best players available at that spot. Of course, either one of these teams could trade down and get more picks and probably wouldn't hurt themselves at all. And, you get that spot in the draft, there's usually a team or two that want to move up and get somebody right there at the end of the first round. And both these teams are set up well to do that.
For sure. A couple players not in my first round mock that were originally in my big board, top 32 on my big board. A couple guys, Deontay Lawson, linebacker, Alabama, Emory Jones, offensive lineman, LSU, Trey Harris, wide receiver, Ole Miss, Ariante Ersey, offensive lineman, Minnesota, Landon Jackson, edge from Arkansas, and Davison Igbinosun, cornerback, Ohio State. Did not make it into my first round this time around. I think cornerback is an area that I still have to study more to properly put into these teams and things like that as well. I'm still working through it. Still early in the process on a lot of these things too. So, Dad, any major concerns in this mock draft, or thoughts on surprises, I guess?
No, for the most part, like I said, I think it made a lot of sense. I'm not sure about Minnesota and the running back, but outside of that, I think things will come into play. It looks like it's going to be a pretty talented draft. So there could be a lot when you're doing with mock drafts. It'll be a little tough. Probably the first half of the second round is going to have some really good players in it there too. This year is what it looks like. But, the positions, football changes year after year, and the things are priorities. Edge rusher's been one of those. Cornerback is one of those. And it looks like this is a good draft for both of those positions. And the tight end thing, like you said, right now, the tight ends, Kelsey, Kittle, all those guys, have made a name where people are definitely looking for tight ends. And you got Bowers, I guess it is, from the Raiders and all that. So teams are using them more, and they've been difference makers.
They have been, and some of those guys are getting old, right? I mean, Kelsey, he looks to be on the tail end of his career. George Kittle hasn't looked super fresh as of late either. So you talk about Ty Warren, Colson Loveland, then you got Elijah Arroyo from Miami, Gunnar Helm from Texas, and Harold Fannin from Bowling Green are the guys to really watch in the second round as well. So, deep stuff. tight end, wide receiver, edge rusher, very, very strong this year. Cornerbacks decent as well. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. All right. So next week we will not have a show. I am moving, and just I will not. I don't even know if I'll have internet by the time that we're supposed to do this show next week. So no show next week. We'll take a week off, and then we'll be back. We'll let you know if you follow us on social media at Sports Stove. You can hear where we're going to go, what we're going to go. Like I said, we'll probably look at some of this free agency things as far as Super Bowl bumps from Eagles free agents, especially, and we'll talk about. I'm sure there will be some news that breaks between now and 2 weeks from now, as well. All right, Dad. Anything else you want to cover before we say goodnight to our listeners tonight?
No, that'll do it. We'll look forward to being back in 2 weeks. And like you said, a lot more stuff will be happening at that standpoint. Probably getting pretty close to the combine and things like that then. So,
Yep. Yeah, we'll be getting there for sure. If you missed any part of the episode, you can catch it on the audio download, the Sports Stove Football Show, wherever you get your podcasts, or also the full replay on Belly Up Sports YouTube channel. So check that out as well. Make sure you check out righteousfelon.com. Use the promo code STOVE15 for 15% off your purchase. And again, follow us on social media at Sports Stove on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks for tuning in to this edition of the Sports Stove Football Show. Until next time, we'll see you around the Sports Stove.